Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, cutting through the noise, giving you a real shortcut to being well informed.
And today, we're tackling a really fascinating work.
Yeah, it's almost a century old, but feels incredibly relevant. John Dewey's The Public and Its Problems from back in 1927.
That's the one. And we're looking at Dewey's original text, but also a really helpful contemporary introduction by Melvin L. Rogers.
Which is great for seeing why it still matters.
Exactly. It helps bridge that gap.
So our goal today is really to unpack Dewey's thoughts, these deep meditations on democracy's future.
Especially with things like mass communication, big government, social complexity.
Yeah.
All the stuff he saw emerging.
And that we're still dealing with. So you'll get why these themes are just as urgent now as they were then. Plus, some surprising facts along the way.
Definitely. Let's dive in.
Okay, so first off, who is John Dewey? To really get this book, you need to understand the man himself.
Right. He wasn't just some obscure philosopher. He was a major public figure, late 19th, early 20th century.
Huge reputation, right. Progressive education, ethics, democracy.
Absolutely. His influence was massive. There's this great quote from the historian Henry Commager in 1950.
Oh, yeah.
He said, "Dewey became the guide, the mentor, and the conscience of the American people." Even saying it was hardly an exaggeration that for a generation, no issue was clarified until Dewey had spoken.
Wow, that's some serious intellectual weight. He wasn't just commenting, he was shaping the conversation.
Precisely. And he wasn't just accepting the standard ideas about democracy either. He drew this really key distinction.
Between what he called modern democracy and, what was the other term?
Classical liberalism.
Yeah.
So his idea of modern democracy stressed equality, shared rule, the people as the source of power.
Okay, and classical liberalism, that's more like Locke, Adam Smith.
Exactly. Think liberty, individual responsibility, private property, keep the state small, kind of a hands-off approach.
But Dewey wasn't buying that entirely.
No, he had a major critique. He felt that focus on the individual as this sort of isolated atom.
Like everyone's just separate.
Yeah, and that limited view of what the state should do, he thought it actually undermined the community aspect that democracy needs.
He saw it as creating a false split.
Right. He pointed out this lingering idea some liberals had of two different spheres, the political and the individual.
And that the political sphere needed to be as small as possible to protect the individual one.
Correct. But Dewey thought that missed the point.
Yeah.
Which leads to what he aligned with, the new liberalism.
Okay, so different from classical. Who's in this camp?
Thinkers like John Stuart Mill, T.H. Green, later W.E.B. Du Bois, John Rawls. People who saw a bigger role for the state.
In doing what exactly?
In tackling problems like economic hardship, political exclusion, recognizing that real freedom sometimes needs, active support from the community and the state.
And this connects back to Dewey's core idea about democracy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because for him, it wasn't just about rules and institutions. That was only part of it.
It was deeper.
Much deeper. He talked about a public culture or ethos, something that touches the mind, heart, and spirit.
He actually called it a moral ideal, right, in that 1939 address.
He did. He said, we need to stop thinking of democracy as just external stuff and start treating it as a way of personal life.
And that fundamental belief, that's really what drives the public and its problems.
It's the engine of the whole book.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly, was largely written in response to someone else.
Ah, the Dewey-Lippmann debate. Walter Lippmann, the journalist.
That's right. They were wrestling with a huge question. Can democracy, popular rule, actually survive in the modern world?
It seems Lippmann was skeptical.
Very. And both he and some earlier thinkers, Dewey pointed out, kind of fell into this trap.
The atomistic fallacy again, seeing society as just individual.
Yeah, like people are just disconnected units until they, sign a contract or something. Dewey thought that completely missed how humans actually are.
What was his counter?
That individuality isn't separate from community, it's realized through it.
So you become yourself by being part of something bigger.
Precisely. He has this beautiful line about how realizing your individuality also means realizing your place in a community. And satisfying the community actually satisfies yourself. It's intertwined.
Okay, so what was Lippmann's big worry? What was his diagnosis?
Well, after World War I, he saw this profound crisis. Old beliefs were crumbling. Science like Darwinism was shaking things up. People felt lost, powerless.
That quote from his book, Drift and Mastery, captures it, right? About being thrown into the water.
Yes. The iconoclasts didn't free us. They threw us into the water, and now we have to swim. It's this sense of liberation being terrifying, not just joyful.
No easy answers anymore.
No. And Lippmann was especially concerned about what he called stereotypes.
Mental shortcuts, preconceived ideas.
Exactly, but really powerful ones. Value-laden emotional shortcuts that shape how we see everything.
And easily manipulated, especially after his experience with WWI propaganda.
Definitely. He said they censor out much that needs to be taken into account and are loaded with emotions, fear, hope, dislike.
So, if people rely on these flawed stereotypes, how can they possibly govern themselves effectively?
That was Lippmann's question. And it led him to a pretty, well, some call it an elitist view.
In what sense?
He basically said the public doesn't really make policy or choose candidates in any deep way.
They just react.
Yeah, it aligns itself for or against somebody who has offered himself. Like choosing sides, not directing the action.
He even admitted it was an impossible task for regular citizens to know enough.
Right, to understand complex issues and have a worthwhile opinion. He felt people just didn't have the time or the knowledge.
So what was his solution? If the public can't handle it?
Experts. Simple as that. They needed to be the ones to give shape to the problems.
Like his factory analogy, you need the accountants, not just the foreman's opinion.
Exactly. Lawmakers needed objective analysis from experts, not just a mess of local feelings.
Okay, so Lippmann paints this picture of an ignorant public needing expert guidance. How did Dewey respond? He didn't just dismiss Lippmann, did he?
No, fascinatingly, he actually agreed with a lot of Lippmann's critique of public ignorance. He even praised Lippmann's book.
Called it one of the most effective indictments of democracy ever written, I think.
He did, but, and this is the crucial but, they fundamentally disagreed on the role of those experts.
Okay, so what was Dewey's take?
For Dewey, the experts should be ancillary, supportive, secondary to the citizens themselves.
Ah, the famous shoe analogy comes in here, right?
Exactly. The man who wears the shoe knows best that it pinches and where it pinches, even if the expert shoemaker is the best judge of how the trouble is to be remedied.
So the public feels the problem. The expert helps fix it, but doesn't decide what the problem is.
Precisely. Experts discover and share the facts, but they don't frame or execute the policies on their own.
And Dewey thought knowledge itself emerges differently.
Yes, through deliberation. Citizens talk about their problems, they articulate what's wrong. That process, that conversation, creates the framework for expertise to even be useful.
So the practical upshot is constant public input. Town halls, hearings.
Absolutely essential for legitimacy, according to Dewey. The burden of proof was on anyone who wanted less public involvement, not more.
This really ties into his whole anti-elitist thing. He wasn't a fan of the Platonic idea of wise rulers slotting everyone into place.
Not at all. He rejected that completely. For Dewey, individuals have to find this place and assume this work in the main for himself. It's about agency, not being positioned by others.
Okay, so if he's rejecting these old ideas, how does Dewey define core concepts like the public and the state?
He takes a very practical, empirical approach. No abstract theories about where the state came from originally.
He starts with actions.
Human actions and their consequences. That's the starting point.
And he splits consequences into two types.
Right. Private ones, they just affect the people directly doing the action. And public ones, the ones that spill over and affect others.
Okay.
And his definition flows right from that. When indirect consequences are recognized and there is effort to regulate them, something having the traits of a state comes into existence.
So the state emerges when we notice and try to manage those wider ripple effects.
Exactly. And the public, then, is simply everyone affected by those indirect consequences enough that they feel those consequences need to be systematically cared for.
And the people doing the caring are the officials.
Yep, the representatives looking out for those shared interests. And the resources they manage. That's the res publica, the Commonwealth.
So, pulling it together, how does he define the state itself?
He says, the public, as far as organized by means of officials and material agencies, to care for the extensive and enduring indirect consequences, is the populace.
The populace, the organized public in action.
Essentially, yes. And he stresses, a public articulated and operating through representative officers is the state. There is no state without a government, but also there is none without the public. They need each other.
It's crucial, though, that the state isn't everything, right? It's not the same as society.
Absolutely not. Society is way broader. Friendships, science clubs, churches, businesses, countless groups exist outside the state's direct political function.
But those groups can become the state's business.
If their consequences spill over, he uses the example of a friendship, usually private. But if it becomes a conspiracy threatening others, then the state gets involved.
Or a business partnership.
Right. Fine on its own. But if it grows so big it starts harming others' security or prosperity, suddenly the gears of the state are in mesh.
So the state can be kind of dormant until needed?
Idle and empty, he says, when its specific job isn't called for.
And this flexible definition means there's no single true form of the state.
Exactly. He talks about the relativity of states. The form can change drastically over time and place. The only constant is that function managing those shared consequences.
Like the King's Peace example in England, gradually expanding its scope.
A perfect historical illustration of the public, and thus the state redefining itself.
What kinds of things does Dewey see the state typically focusing on?
Mostly old, well-established behaviors and structures. Things where the consequences are known to be far-reaching, consistent, maybe even irreparable if ignored.
Like roads, schools, safety rules.
Yes, things that are settled. New ideas, inventions, art. That's more of a private performance, he says. The state's main job there is just to tolerate them, let them develop.
But this whole system isn't static. Progress isn't guaranteed.
Definitely not. Retrogression is as periodic as advance, he warns. New technologies, new social arrangements create new publics with new shared consequences.
But if the old political structures don't adapt,
Then those new publics remain inchoate, unorganized, frustrated. People start to disregard the state because it doesn't reflect their reality.
leading to.
Sometimes the public has to break existing political forms. Revolution, even. It's why he insists the state must always be rediscovered. It's an ongoing experiment.
Which brings us squarely to the core problem he identified in his own time, the eclipse of the public.
Yes, this is central. He felt the sheer scare and complexity of the machine age had overwhelmed the public.
How so?
Technology had massively expanded the scope and intensity of those indirect consequences. Think factories, railroads, mass media.
Creating huge, impersonal systems.
Exactly. Immense and consolidated unions in action on an impersonal rather than a community basis.
Yeah.
The result. The public literally couldn't see itself clearly anymore. It cannot identify and distinguish itself.
It's just too much, too complicated.
Too many publics and too much of public concern for our existing resources to cope with. He saw it mainly as an intellectual problem. How do we even grasp it all?
And he contrasted this modern situation with the past.
Vividly. The old traditional community was local, face-to-face. You knew people, you understood the direct impact of things.
But the new great society, created by steam and electricity,
Maybe a society, but it is no community. It connects people technically, but not meaningfully. It lacks that shared understanding.
which leads to people feeling disconnected, apathetic, like their vote doesn't matter.
Precisely that apathy. What difference does it make? My vote never changed anything. And who steps into that gap?
The political bosses filling the vacuum.
Yes. Plus, the issues themselves become incredibly technical.
Like his examples, muscle shoals, hydroelectric power, things most people couldn't possibly research fully.
Right. How can you have informed consent or participation when the subject matter is so specialized?
And then there are the distractions.
Oh, yes. He didn't hold back there. Cheapened and multiplied access to amusement, movies, radio, cars.
Pulling people away from civic life.
A powerful diversion, he called it. The political elements, having to do with citizenship, are crowded to one side. Entertainment trumps engagement.
And mobility plays a role, too. People moving around constantly.
Huge role. This mania for motion and speed disrupts stable communities. Families change, people move to cities.
Weakening attachments.
It disturbs attachments at their root, he said. And without abiding attachments, it's hard for a public to form a stable identity, to locate and identify itself.
So, summing up this eclipse, it's complexity, distraction, broken connections. What's the underlying issue?
He nails it by saying our mental and moral beliefs and ideals change more slowly than outward conditions. We're living in a new world with old ways of thinking.
We lack the right symbols, the shared language for this new age.
Exactly. The new age has no symbols consonant with its activities, which leaves the public shadowy, confused.
Leading to that really powerful conclusion.
Till the great society is converted into a great community, the public will remain in eclipse. Communication can alone create a great community. Our Babel is not one of tongues, but of the signs and symbols without which shared experience is impossible.
Wow. So the task is immense. Transforming this vast impersonal great society into a genuine great community through communication.
That's the challenge he lays down.
So given this daunting diagnosis, what's Dewey's path forward? What's the solution? It's not just more of the same democracy, is it?
No, not just more voting or more bureaucracy. He calls for returning to the idea itself, clarifying and deepening our understanding of democracy.
And using that deeper understanding to critique and reshape how we actually do politics.
Exactly. And a key part of that is ditching the myth of the omnicompetent individual.
The idea that any single citizen can or should know everything.
Right? That's an illusion. Knowledge isn't an individual possession. It's social. It relies on association and communication, on shared tools, methods, traditions.
Even our habits are socially formed.
Profoundly.
Yeah.
They shape our thoughts and actions often without us realizing it.
Okay, so if the individual isn't the all-knowing unit, what is needed to bring the public out of Eclipse? What are the conditions?
He lays out several crucial ones. First, transparency. Absolute full publicity regarding consequences that affect the public.
No hiding things.
None. Blocking information limits and distorts public opinion. He specifically warns against government by hired promoters of opinion or PR agents.
Interesting. What else?
We need to overcome our ingrained fears, emotional habituations, and intellectual habitudes that make us resist experimenting in social and political life.
We cling to old institutions almost religiously.
Often, yes, disguised as reverence for tradition, but sometimes just fear of the unknown. Integrated knowledge. Social science needs to connect with physical science, and it has to acknowledge how human interests shape the facts we focus on. It can't pretend to be totally objective in that sense.
And fourth ties back to communication again.
Critically, knowledge is communication.
Yeah.
A thing isn't truly known until it's published, shared, socially accessible.
So forming public opinion is the act of communicating social inquiry.
They are essentially the same thing for Dewey.
And finally, the quality of that communication matters.
Immensely. It's not just about having the technology, the radios, the printing presses. We need communication that's an art, subtle, vivid, responsive, something that breathes life into the data.
So ultimately, democracy for Dewey is this constant process of remaking.
Reconstruction, he calls it. Remaking the ways and forms in which men unite in associated activity. It's about continuously redistributing social power and individual capacities. It never stops.
And he advocated for an experimental approach, treating policies like hypotheses.
Exactly. Concepts are tools, policies are working hypotheses. You test them, you watch the consequences closely, and you have to be ready for flexible revision.
Like science, but for society. Be willing to adapt based on evidence.
That's the idea.
But amidst all this large-scale thinking, he still valued the local, didn't he?
Absolutely crucial. He believed that community, in its deepest and richest sense, must always involve face-to-face intercourse.
Why is that so important?
Those local interactions, those small groups, are the chief agencies of nurture. They're where we form our basic character, our stable dispositions. It's foundational.
So the grand vision isn't to replace local life, but to connect it to the bigger picture.
Precisely. The goal is for the vast networks of the Great Society, the translocal associations, to enrich those smaller, intimate, local communities, the great community.
So the meanings flow from the large scale into the small scale, making both more vital.
Yes, enabled by technology used not to isolate, but as an instrumentality of shared and communicated experience.
So we've journeyed through Dewey's diagnosis, that sobering eclipse of the public in the modern age.
And we've seen his demanding, but ultimately hopeful vision for how we might transform that impersonal great society into a living great community.
It really hinges on recognizing and communicating those indirect consequences.
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
democracy needs that conscious public, formed by understanding those consequences, well, it raises a question for us today.
Which is,
What are the unseen consequences of our own digital age, our interactions online, the algorithms, the data? What new publics are being formed right now, perhaps without us even fully realizing it?
and following Dewey, how can we actively work to make those consequences and those emerging digital publics truly known and articulate?
So they can guide rather than undermine a genuinely democratic future.
A powerful thought to leave our listeners with. A real challenge for our times, grounded in thinking from almost a century ago.